The phone call came on July 13, 2012. At 3:47 p.m., Sylvester Stallone was in his office in Los Angeles when his assistant knocked on the door. The look on her face told him something was catastrophically wrong. She handed him the phone without speaking. On the other end was a police detective. The words came slowly, carefully, the way they're trained to deliver news that destroys lives. "Mr. Stallone, I'm sorry to inform you that your son Sage has been found deceased at his residence." Stallone's world stopped. His firstborn son. His 36-year-old boy, dead. The detective continued with details that Stallone would later say he didn't hear. Something about neighbors calling. Something about 3 days. Something about the apartment. 3 days. His son had been dead for 3 days before anyone found him. Sylvester Stallone dropped the phone and collapsed. This is the story of the tragedy that broke Hollywood's toughest man. The death that Stallone never recovered from. The guilt that still haunts him a decade later. Sage Moonblood Stallone was born on May 5, 1976, in Los Angeles. His arrival came at the peak of his father's fame. Rocky had just won Best Picture. Sylvester Stallone was the hottest star in Hollywood, the ultimate success story, the man who'd conquered impossible odds. But fame and fatherhood are difficult to balance. From the beginning, Stallone struggled with being present. He was making movies back to back. Rocky sequels, Rambo, Paradise Alley. His career demanded constant attention, constant travel, constant focus. Sage grew up in his father's massive shadow. Literally, everywhere he went, people knew him as Sylvester Stallone's son. The comparisons were constant. The expectations were crushing. As a child, Sage seemed to handle it well. He was quiet, artistic, sensitive traits that didn't match his father's public image. While Stallone was boxing and shooting guns on screen, young Sage was drawing, reading, interested in filmmaking from an artistic perspective. Their relationship was complicated from the start. Stallone loved his son desperately, but didn't know how to connect with him. Sage wanted his father's approval, but resented his absence. It was a dynamic that would define their entire relationship. When Stallone's marriage to Sasha Jack fell apart in 1985, his affair with Brigitte Nielsen destroyed the family. 9-year-old Sage was caught in the middle. The divorce was brutal, custody battles, media scrutiny. A child watching his parents' marriage disintegrate in tabloid headlines. Sage and his younger brother Sergio, who was diagnosed with autism, became pawns in legal warfare. Stallone admitted years later, "I failed as a husband. And in failing as a husband, I failed my sons. Sage especially. He needed stability, and I gave him chaos." After the divorce, Stallone's relationship with Sage became increasingly strained. Stallone remarried first Brigitte Nielsen for a disastrous 18 months, then Jennifer Flavin in 1997. New families, new priorities, new children. Sage felt abandoned. Friends said he rarely spoke about his father without bitterness creeping into his voice. In 1990, when Sage was 14, Stallone offered him a role in Rocky V. It should have been a bonding experience. Father and son working together. Sage playing Rocky Balboa's son, art imitating life. Instead, it became another source of pain. On set, Stallone was demanding pushing Sage hard, expecting professional perfection from a teenager with no acting training. Crew members said Stallone was tougher on Sage than on any other actor, as if trying to prove he wasn't giving his son special treatment. Sage struggled. The pressure was immense. He was acting opposite his famous father in a beloved franchise, with the entire world watching and comparing. Critics would later praise his performance, but during filming, Sage felt like he was failing. The movie's plot about a father-son relationship, strained by expectations and disappointment, hit too close to home. The fictional Rocky and Rocky Jr. were working through the same issues as real-life Sylvester and Sage. After Rocky V, Sage stepped away from acting. He'd later say, "I didn't want to be Sylvester Stallone's son in movies. I wanted to be my own person," but finding his own identity proved nearly impossible. Through the 1990s and early 2000s, Sage drifted. He tried filmmaking, starting a company called Grindhouse Releasing that restored cult films. He dabbled in acting occasionally. He worked behind the camera on various projects. But he never found stable footing. Friends said he seemed lost, searching for purpose in his father's shadow. His relationship with Stallone deteriorated. They'd go months without speaking. When they did talk, conversations were tense, loaded with unresolved resentment. Stallone was building new families, 3 daughters with Jennifer Flavin. Beautiful, well-adjusted girls who seemed to have the stable childhood Sage never got. The contrast was painful. In 2006, Stallone experienced career resurrection with Rocky Balboa. Interviews praised him as a comeback king, a devoted father figure in the film. But the real-life relationship with his actual son remained broken. Sage watched his father's comeback from distance. He was proud. Anyone who knew Sage said he loved his father despite everything. But the pride was mixed with sadness. His father had time for Rocky Balboa, but seemingly never enough time for Sage Stallone. By 2012, Sage was 36 years old and struggling. He was living alone in a small studio apartment in Studio City, California. The place was cluttered film memorabilia, movie posters, stacks of DVDs from his restoration business. It wasn't poverty, but it wasn't the life anyone expected for Sylvester Stallone's son. Friends said Sage had been depressed. His restoration business was failing. His romantic relationships kept falling apart. He felt like a disappointment to his father, to himself, to everyone. He'd gained weight. He looked older than 36. He had dental problems he'd been putting off treating. His health was declining, but he avoided doctors. Most concerningly, he'd been isolating, going days without seeing anyone, not returning calls, disappearing into his apartment with his film collection and his regrets. His last conversation with his father was July 9, 2012, 4 days before his body was found. They spoke briefly on the phone. The conversation was surface level. Work, weather, nothing meaningful. Stallone later said he sensed something was wrong but didn't push. He was busy. He'd call back later. He never got the chance. On July 13th, concerned neighbors contacted police about a smell coming from Sage's apartment. Officers broke down the door and found him in bed, surrounded by empty prescription bottles. He'd been dead for approximately 3 days. The preliminary cause appeared to be heart attack related to undiagnosed heart disease, possibly exacerbated by prescription medication. He died alone, in a small apartment, while his father was 5 miles away in a mansion. When Stallone arrived at the scene, police had already removed the body. He stood in his son's apartment, the cluttered space, the film posters, the DVD collection, and broke down completely. Witnesses said Stallone became hysterical. He was screaming, sobbing, collapsing. Police had to physically support him. This wasn't the tough guy image. This was a father destroyed by loss and guilt. Later, investigators would find Sage's phone. The call log showed multiple missed calls from Stallone over the 3 days Sage had been dead. Stallone had been trying to reach his son, not knowing he was already gone. That detail, that Stallone had been calling while Sage's body lay undiscovered, would haunt him forever. The media circus that followed was brutal. Within hours, paparazzi surrounded Stallone's home. News helicopters circled overhead. Tabloids ran headlines. Stallone's son found dead. Rocky star's tragedy. Autopsy pending in mysterious death. Speculation ran wild. Drugs? Suicide? Foul play? The tabloids had no shame, publishing gruesome details, interviewing anyone who'd talk, turning a family's private grief into public entertainment. Stallone retreated from public view. For weeks, he was invisible. His representatives issued brief statements asking for privacy, but the media didn't care. They camped outside his house, followed his car, shouted questions about his dead son. The autopsy results came back. Atherosclerotic heart disease. Sage's heart had been severely diseased, years of poor health, bad diet, lack of medical care had created blockages. The heart attack was natural causes, exacerbated by prescription medications found in his system. Not suicide, not drugs. Just a sick young man whose heart gave out. But for Stallone, the cause of death didn't matter. His son was gone, and he hadn't been there. At the funeral, Stallone was barely functional. He wore sunglasses to hide his red, swollen eyes. He needed physical support to walk. When he tried to speak, his voice broke. He couldn't finish. He stood at the casket, put his hand on it, and sobbed. Attendees said it was the most heartbreaking thing they'd ever witnessed. Sylvester Stallone Rocky, Rambo, the symbol of strength, completely shattered. After the service, Stallone disappeared for months. He canceled appearances. He stopped working. Friends said he was barely leaving his house, consumed by depression and guilt. The guilt was overwhelming. Every conversation he'd rushed through, every time he'd been too busy to visit, every moment he'd prioritized work over his son, it all came crushing back. He'd been 5 miles away when Sage died. 5 miles. And he hadn't known, hadn't sensed it, hadn't been there. In the months following Sage's death, Stallone's family worried about his mental state. Jennifer Flavin said he barely slept. He'd wake up at 3 a.m. and sit alone in the dark. He lost weight. He looked haunted. Friends said he became obsessed with going through Sage's belongings, the film collection, the restoration business materials, old photos, looking for answers, looking for connection to the son he'd lost. He found journals. Sage had written about feeling alone, about wanting his father's approval, about feeling like a disappointment. Reading those words destroyed Stallone again. One entry particularly haunted him. Sage had written, "I know my dad loves me, but I don't think he likes who I am. I'm not the son he wanted. I'm not strong like him. I'm just a disappointment." Stallone told friends that reading those words felt like being stabbed, because it was true. He had been disappointed that Sage wasn't more like him. He had pushed too hard. He had expected Sage to be something he wasn't, and now Sage was gone, and Stallone would never get the chance to tell him that it was okay, that he was proud of him, that he loved him exactly as he was. Slowly, painfully, Stallone tried to return to life. In 2013, he gave his first interview about Sage's death. He broke down multiple times during the conversation. He talked about the guilt, about the missed opportunities, about the phone calls he should have made but didn't. "Time is the one thing you can't get back," Stallone said, his voice thick with emotion. "I had time, I had so much time, and I wasted it. I was busy with work, with career, with things that don't matter. And now my son is gone, and I'd give anything, everything for one more conversation." The interviewer asked if he had closure. Stallone shook his head. "You don't get closure when your child dies. You get guilt. You get regret. You get a hole in your heart that never fills. People say time heals. It doesn't. You just learn to live with the pain." Over the following years, Stallone channeled his grief into his work. Creed, released in 2015, featured Rocky Balboa as an aging man confronting mortality and legacy. The performance earned Stallone an Oscar nomination, his first in nearly 40 years. During press tours, Stallone admitted the role was influenced by Sage's death. Playing an older man reflecting on lost time and broken relationships wasn't acting, it was therapy. In one scene, Rocky visits Adrian's grave and talks about regrets. Stallone said he was thinking about Sage during that scene. The tears were real. In 2018, on what would have been Sage's 42nd birthday, Stallone posted on social media for the first time about his son. The post was simple, a photo of young Sage smiling. The caption, "I miss you every day. I'm sorry I wasn't the father you deserved. I love you, Sage." The post received millions of responses. People shared their own stories of loss and regret. Other parents who'd lost children reached out. The outpouring was massive. But Stallone later said the post wasn't about public catharsis. It was about finally saying the words he never got to say when Sage was alive. Today, Stallone rarely speaks publicly about Sage. The pain is still too raw. Close friends say he thinks about his son every day. The guilt never goes away. He keeps a photo of young Sage on his desk from Rocky V, father and son together on set. It's a reminder of what he had, of what he lost, of what he can never get back. In a 2021 interview, Stallone was asked about his greatest regret in life. He didn't hesitate. Not being there for my son. Not telling him often enough that he was enough. That he didn't need to be anyone except himself. That I loved him unconditionally, even if I was terrible at showing it. I thought I had time. That's the lie we tell ourselves. I'll make it up later. I'll be there next time. I'll call tomorrow. And then tomorrow doesn't come. And your son is gone. And you realize you wasted the only thing that mattered, time with someone you loved. He paused, collecting himself. If there's anything I could tell fathers out there, don't wait. Don't assume you'll have time later. Tell your kids you love them. Be present. Because one day you won't get another chance. And that regret, it's worse than any physical pain I've ever experienced. It's worse than any failure. It's a pain that never stops. The interviewer asked if he believed in an afterlife, if he thought he'd see Sage again. Stallone's eyes filled with tears. I have to believe that. Because the alternative, that I'll never get to tell him I'm sorry, that I love him, that I was wrong, that's unbearable. So yes, I believe I'll see him again. And the first thing I'll say is, I'm sorry. Sage, I'm so sorry I wasn't the father you needed. The death of Sage Stallone is the tragedy that broke Sylvester Stallone in ways his body never could. All the broken bones, the injuries, the physical punishment he endured for his career, none of it compared to losing his son. None of it came close to the guilt of realizing he'd prioritized fame over fatherhood. Sage died at 36, alone, in a small apartment, while his father was 5 miles away. And Sylvester Stallone, who'd survived poverty, rejection, career failures, physical destruction, couldn't survive that reality unchanged. The guilt didn't kill him, but it broke something inside that will never fully heal. In his office, next to the photo of young Sage, Stallone keeps a note. Something Sage wrote to him as a child, found among his belongings after his death. It reads, "Dear Dad, I know you're busy being Rocky and Rambo. That's okay. I'm proud of you. I just wish sometimes you could just be my dad. Love, Sage." That note, a child's simple wish, is the reminder of what Stallone lost. Not just a son, but all the moments he could have been just a dad instead of a superstar. The moments he can never get back. The son he couldn't save, not from heart disease, but from the loneliness of growing up in a famous father's shadow, always wanting more time, more attention, more connection. Time Stallone had but didn't give, until it was too late. That's the tragedy that still haunts Hollywood's toughest man. The role he failed at most, being the father Sage Stallone needed. And unlike Rocky, there's no comeback from that loss. No triumphant return. Just grief, guilt, and the unbearable weight of words left unsaid.